Hello, I'm Shashi Tharoor, author and Member of Parliament in India, and I'm delighted by this invitation to say a few words about emerging trends in the post-COVID era. The world, of course, is faced with a major disruption. We've never seen anything like it in living memory. And while, of course, the human race has found ways to bounce back from various calamities and various pandemics, the truth is that some change is expected to be likely. This is a mega shock after all, with deaths in the thousands, indeed globally tens of thousands, and of course the loss of tremendous amounts of financial value, and various other setbacks, particularly in the domain of public health, of the lives of older people, and of ways of work and living. But in the limited time I have, I'd like to focus on politics and geopolitics, because there's no question in my mind that a number of trends have already begun to emerge which may well survive the post-COVID era. One that I'm seeing in India is the great risk of the rise of a surveillance state. As people said that it became indispensable for many to be able to trace people who had been exposed to the COVID virus, data collection was deemed important, and apps began to be invented that combined GPS, Bluetooth, cell phone towers, and similar paraphernalia in order to trace and track the movements of the holders of these apps. Now, they might well help tell you if you're being exposed to somebody who has had the virus or has it now, but if it continues on your phone beyond the virus, it can be used to trace your movements, whether you're meeting with opposition leaders, whether you're attending undesirable events, whether you're going to opposition rallies, and so on. A very unhealthy instrument in the hands of some governments. No question also that there's got to be real changes in various countries' politics when it comes to the importance and emphasis given to public health, to new national discourses on the way in which security is interpreted to include human security and not just military security. But let's move on to geopolitics, because we're already seeing some important trends. A real worry for multilateralism. We've seen President Trump lash out at WHO, threatening, in fact, to convert his temporary spending halt into a permanent freeze and possibly reconsider US membership in the WHO. The question coming up at a time when international institutions were already straining for relevance, whether indeed multilateralism could be a casualty of COVID. The risk of a geopolitical backlash against China versus the equally significant risk of China being first off the block in recovering from COVID and thereby asserting a first mover advantage in taking the geopolitical lead over many countries. It's interesting to see the praise being lavished by Italy and Serbia on China for its assistance in battling the virus, the kind of praise we have not seen expressed by those countries, even for their neighbours in the European Union, which remains divided over the corona bonds issue, with the Frugal Four saying that they don't want to subsidise the financial fecklessness of the afflicted South. So Europe is no longer looking like a great vanguard of internationalism. Multilateralism is under threat. China may well be rising, but equally there is a pressure to decouple from it. The US has announced that many companies are leaving and should leave China. Japan has given a $2 billion set of incentives for Japanese companies to pull out of China and move elsewhere, ideally to Japan, but if not, there's $250 million available in incentives to move to other developing countries that are not China. How this is going to play out remains to be seen. There is a worry about more global xenophobia rising. When you demonize people who bring in a virus, you're often demonizing not just virus carriers, but foreigners generally, the other, the external world from which the virus has come. And that could have consequences, with incidents already circulating on social media showing people who look Chinese being thrown out of supermarkets and other establishments in some Western countries. You're also seeing a genuine prospect of increasing protectionism and therefore perhaps the prospect of deglobalization as countries backtrack. The disruption of supply chains at the beginning of the COVID crisis has created a new emphasis on self-reliance in many countries. And that self-reliance, that emphasis that we need to move manufacturing closer, if not move it home, linked to a trend in favor of hyper-nationalism that was already apparent before the COVID crisis, but has been reinforced by it. That too could give us a very different world to live in. I'm more and more convinced that the geopolitical changes that we've begun to see now are not going to disappear. Certainly the increasing protectionism and withdrawal or isolationism that may arise in the US if President Trump is re-elected should not be discounted. Obviously, a Biden election is likely to give us a return to the America we've all known for a longer time. But there are many tendencies, and a desire not to be dependent on China will be felt by many countries, by individuals, nations, and corporations. And their individual decisions may also create a more divided world. One thing is very clear: business as usual is not going to be the case. We will see a different world. How that's going to emerge remains to be seen. We all need to watch this space.